Welcome to the Published Press podcast. I'm Steve Birch, and in this episode, we're going to try and tell two stories with one guest. Our guest is Karim Marucchi from the crowd favorite agency. The first story is Karim's life working with really big agencies, some of the biggest agencies in the world, and selling projects to some of the biggest companies in the world. He tells the story of how he sat down and sold Steve Jobs on a website project. And then in the second part of the episode, we talk about open source and WordPress and the value of open source to those big enterprise customers. Karim is working really hard at the moment with the FAIR project. We'll explain what that is. The FAIR project is part of trying to sell the value of open source to those big enterprise customers. So in the first part of the episode, you hear about Karim's life. And then in the second part, we talk about what he's doing right now and how he's trying to sell companies like Disney and big universities on using open source and trusting open source. If we get this right at this point, we might be setting up WordPress and open source for more success over the next 20 years. Hey, Karim, welcome to the Published Press podcast.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we have a whole bunch of people on this podcast who have run in the opposite direction from enterprise work. They have started their own little business. They're the boss, they're the CEO, and maybe they have a few people around them, and they love it that way. But you're different. You've had a whole career in the enterprise, right?
Yeah. I fell into internet work directly into the enterprise. My first project was a microsite for Nissan Motors. And my second project was an extranet and an intranet for Nissan.
You didn't even train on anything computer related, right? You were an architect by training?
So I graduated university with a master's in architecture, and quite literally the next day started a job at Autodesk. That was the famous company that started AutoCAD.
Oh, yeah.
And wrote scripts and thought that I could be a programmer. Failed miserably at that.
You moved up into management instead of
I failed into
architecture. Okay.
I failed into marketing and helped the marketing team launch the first version of AutoCAD on Windows.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I would go around to all the big architectural studios nationwide and explain how amazing the next version would be. With my programming background, I was able to explain it to regular architects in plain English. With a team of engineers from Autodesk. And that was my introduction into technology, which then led to me having a sabbatical between trips for a couple of weeks in Los Angeles. And a friend of mine was starting an ISP in 1994. And literally, they were hooking up all these modems and starting this ISP, and the phone rang, and they said, "Hey, would you mind answering the phone?" When I answered the phone, somebody on the other end of the phone said, "Hey, do you do websites?" And I didn't know what my friends were setting up the business to do other than being an ISP. So I just answered a question with a question. I said, "Who's calling?" And they said, "Porter Novelli, we need a website for Nissan." So not knowing the first thing about HTML at the time, I said, "Yes, of course we do."
This was 1994 when the state of the web was most people were just getting their first email address.
Yeah. My mistake started when Los Angeles' first web shops.
Oh, so this was separate from the ISP?
Yeah, just that phone call led to quitting Autodesk and starting a web shop.
And moving to LA as well?
I was already in Los Angeles because of being there with Autodesk and some of the architectural work.
But during the early years at Autodesk, you had a lot of experience walking into big companies, making a sales pitch for a large company.
Yes.
Understanding exactly how to make sales to large companies, to the enterprise. So how did things go from there? You had,
I think I was young and experienced and not afraid. Oh,
so you had your own little independent web shop in LA. How did it scale up from there?
We were lucky enough that all we did really was work with Porter Novelli and Edelman at the time, did a lot of PR work for Fortune clients. And then the big break really was through a producer in Los Angeles. We were given the opportunity to do a website for A Bug's Life, the movie.
Oh, yes, I remember that. Yeah.
This is back when you actually would make money on making websites for movies. I had the pleasure and the experience to actually have to pitch the web ideas. I was the project manager and the account manager on the job, had to pitch the ideas directly to Steve Jobs.
I had never heard that story before from you.
It's not one that I share a lot. It's old news by now, but
that was in his Pixar days, right?
It was.
A Bug's Life was
everything they say about his personality was absolutely true.
It was probably the hardest presentation you've ever given. The most difficult presentation?
Absolutely. The firm was fired multiple times, and then the next day we would be called by one of his managers and rehired and told what to change for the next pitch.
This would have been 1990, late 90s maybe?
I'm sorry, 96, 96-ish? Yeah. I have to look it up. I believe the movie came out in 97. I'd have to look it up. I don't remember.
He was, I think famously, he matured a little bit after leaving Apple and then coming back. But certainly in those earlier days, he was very volatile and would fire and rehire people rapidly.
It was a great experience, and that sort of put our agency on the map. I still have a copy of the Bug's Life website. It's quite literally 8 HTML pages with animated GIFs.
I was going to ask, like most movie websites are just a handful of pages, right? Not the largest and most complicated projects.
Yeah. This was for those of your audience who have a long memory, this was even before Flash became as popular as it was later. So it was a lot of fun, but that put our agency on the map. And eventually, I was acquired by US Web CKS, which was part of WPP.
Oh, WPP, for people that don't know, it's a very large agency at this point. It's
one of the 3 international conglomerates that owns most of the advertising agencies. Those conglomerates are shrinking these days, but at the time, they were what ran Madison Avenue internationally.
So after being acquired, did you stay inside the WPP network?
Yes, actually. So I ran all the way up to the beginning of 99 within WPP at US Web CKS. And then they decided they wanted to change tactics. We had gone in the Los Angeles office from I think I was employee number 87 in the Los Angeles office. Within 2 years, we were almost 600 people.
Wow.
It was mega growth. As a manager in that office, they actually hired consultants from Anderson Consulting, now Accenture, to actually shadow us new managers and teach us how to manage more people. It was hyper growth, the true first internet bubble. And it was very interesting because within 2 years, they decided they wanted to switch from building websites to just doing strategy for websites. And I had a lot of production people who reported up to me. So I went to US Web Management and I said, I see an opportunity to move American architects in production to help the European market catch up to us, because at the time the European market was really lagging in what we were doing. And what ended up happening is they weren't interested, but WPP, parent company, was. So they allowed me to take a certain number of staff directly and start a different agency, specifically bringing American and European expertise together for European Fortune clients. And we took that public on the Italian Stock Exchange.
Because you speak Italian, you had a lot of experience in selling inside Europe. It was something very much within your comfort zone, but within your knowledge within your expertise.
Yeah, notwithstanding this accent, I was actually born in Italy and I'm a dual citizen.
Did you have to move back over there in order to service the European clients? Did you take a trip back to Europe for a while?
I wish I was able to. I ended up actually being bicontinental for 2 years. I would spend quite literally a few days in Southern California and a few days in Milan or Paris at a time and fly back and forth. I was young, didn't realize the limits and the strain it would cause, and just tried it and did it. It was an amazing experience, but not one I would ever want to repeat.
So you were running a successful agency in the States. You repeated that process, running a successful agency in Europe as well. What was next after that for you? So you exited the company and sold it it went public on the Italian Stock Exchange?
Right. Well, I never owned it outright. And the way it works in the agencies is the WPP was taking the company public. I just happened to be one of the leaders. So as they take the company public back in the first internet bubble, what would happen is they replace the internet entrepreneurs with experienced executives. So going public was my exit. And then I spent some time working directly for Sir Martin Sorrell at WPP, looking at European agencies, acquiring them for, at the time, Young and Rubicon and J. Walter Thompson and Ogilvy and the rest of those traditional advertising agencies. This predated what became known as WPP Digital. I think it probably helped build what became that practice. So I spent a lot of time understanding how to integrate internet production teams into advertising agencies and what the models looked like. At WordCamp Europe 2015 in Spain, I gave a speech which my WordPress friends still laugh at me today about, where I told stories about how WPP would not care about the perceived value of an agency and play all sorts of tricks to try and make sure that an agency was acquired for a good price. My point in that talk was to try and help the WordPress community understand that they have to look at traditional business growth rather than just how cool the work is.
Oh, so too many people are chasing the coolest name to add to their client list rather than actually racking up some the revenue, some good business fundamentals.
And the interesting projects, right? So what I'm most proud of at Crowd Favorite today is that we do projects that include WordPress that are difficult, that are cutting edge, that other agencies wouldn't take on or wouldn't have the breadth of technical understanding to take on.
How did you make that leap? You were working in Europe, you were working deep inside WPP, examining agencies. How did you make the leap from that to WordPress and to Crowd Favorite?
I'll skip over two other agencies that had to do with video production and event production. That was a lot of fun. And I'll bring you right to 2007 when I discovered open source really for the first time. I'd obviously known about open source, but I really discovered the possible strengths of open source for the enterprise, learning from what happened in 2099 with Red Hat and IBM. I really thought there was an opportunity for the enterprise to stop using proprietary CMSs. So I started looking into it. One thing led to another, and a friend of mine who was working at Disney introduced me to the then CIO of Disney in a conversation. Again, I was based in Los Angeles, and they were saying we need to get rid of our old publishing system. It's costing us tens of millions of dollars a year for maintaining it. And we're looking at open source. I've put together a small group. Would you be interested in helping? So we started looking at that and made some recommendations there. They started playing with some of them, and then another opportunity came up where they needed to try a open source project, and we ended up creating a website that at the time didn't look anything like WordPress looked. WordPress at the time looked very bloggish, and we ended up making a full screen, multimedia and highly sort of image-based website with WordPress. And that helped lead the Walt Disney Company into making a commitment to WordPress for all of their websites.
Oh, so your entry to WordPress, and I think almost like the founding project of Crowd Favorite, was moving Disney over to open source.
My founding project to WordPress, Crowd Favorite, was founded before that by Alex King.
Okay.
Right. Alex King was one of the first contributors to WordPress. I think maybe number 5 or 6. You can look that up on WordPress.org, where he helped really define where WordPress was going in the early years, and famously had a lot of debates on what the best practices were.
So you were you joined Crowd Favorite several years into the agency's life.
Well, actually, I started a firm called Velomedia, and we were very focused just on Fortune 50 clients and helping them understand the possibilities with WordPress as either a second CMS system or a primary CMS system. And we were really focused there. And then we started collaborating with Crowd Favorite and Alex King, 2011-ish, 2012-ish. That led to a lot of good work. And by the beginning of 2014, when Alex was, he had come out of a health scare, we merged the companies. And there was a time where he was CTO and I led the commercial arm of the company as CEO. And then unfortunately he relapsed and eventually passed away. Big loss for the WordPress community.
So what were the enterprises using before you and Alex and the Crowd Favorite and some of the other early pioneers in the WordPress space? What were they using before? What was WordPress an alternative to for these big enterprises?
Well, in my opinion, what led the enterprise to WordPress was less my work and more Alex King's work. Alex King was one of the first pioneers to bring WordPress to the publishers. So quite literally, some of the first publishing websites ever, some of the first clients ever of what became WordPress VIP at Automatic were built by Crowd Favorite. Crowd Favorite was one of the first VIP partners before there was a partner program. They were quite literally there. Alex worked directly with Matt on trying to make some of those first publishing sites work. And they did. And he really was a driving force in bringing the publishing world into WordPress and bringing WordPress into the publishing world.
So publishing was almost the niche, the entry point that was then like the bridgehead that was then used to expand open source in the enterprise.
And by 2015, there was a race for all publishers to really look at WordPress as an alternative. And VIP, WP Engine, and others were really focused on that. There were a lot of agencies really growing and focusing on that. A lot of the agencies that are now in the Scale Consortium, a lot of the agencies like 10 Up Fueled. And that's when we went, all right, we're going to pivot out of publishing and go look at other use cases.
So where are you headed now? What kind of projects is Crowd Favorite looking to bring in the door?
So it's interesting. When we exited publishing, we started looking at what today people are calling composable and modular. So we were some of the first pioneers of using WordPress as a core and connecting it to other data points and enterprise systems to create central publishing. That famously then turned into what for a while people called DXPs, digital experience platforms. Then that turned back into composable, today modular. We started replacing some of the core WordPress functions with Laravel way back in 2015, 2016. We did a few hybrid sites. Then we did some sites that were pure Laravel when WordPress didn't fit the mark. And we've really did a lot of early pioneering work in how do you make a hybrid website where you have the ease of use of WordPress, you have the ecosystem of the WordPress plugins and themes, yet the back end is really scaled to use a lot of different back end systems of the enterprise to do much more than just publish pages and posts.
What is the key value proposition for these companies that are coming to you? Is it the ownership they have over the product, given that it's open source? They don't have to get their lawyers involved to make sure they're not impinging on the license. I've seen projects involving, say, you used to do quite a bit of university work and would always run into instances with Blackboard.
I remember.
They'd be sicking their lawyers on people who are trying to do too much. Is the freedom value of open source the main thing these enterprises are looking for?
So it's changed over the years. When I first came to WordPress, and for the first 5 or 6 years, it was quite literally about the ease of use. And this predates Gutenberg. It was the ease of customization, the ease of use. Back then, you could teach somebody who had no experience in using a CMS how to publish a page in a matter of minutes instead of hours for a well set up WordPress site. Page builders made that even easier. Gutenberg is finally being developed in a way that it actually really is enterprise ready. So it's always been an ease of use. But over the years now, what's changed it are external factors that inside the WordPress bubble people don't realize. Those external factors are that we've had 10 to 15 years of funding SaaS products that isn't sustainable. The SaaS world, every year, if we look at the closed source CMSs, every year, every few years, they have to extend their pricing. They have to raise their pricing. Right now, Sitecore is going through a point where a lot of clients are exiting Sitecore because the pricing has gone up. There's a lot of SaaS products where that's happening. And the enterprise now is saying, how can I guarantee for my procurement? I understand the costs. If I'm going to spend the money to churn to a new platform, how can I own the data, own the experience, own the procurement cycle, and not have uncontrolled cost hikes in the future? So what's become, let's look at open source because we can own the data, is starting to become, how can we own the procurement cycle? And some of our most cutting edge clients right now are experimenting with replacing SaaS products with some of the more fast, easy to build products that can be done with open source libraries using a system integration company like Crowd Favorite.
Karim, you trained as an architect, and it seems as if you've almost come full circle now. You're playing the role not of a developer, not digging down and doing the dirty work, but being a full system architect, helping these enterprises put together their own internal environments?
I'm really glad you see that, because that is exactly what we've tried to do. We've tried to move Crud Favorite from being seen as a web development shop to really an open source architecture shop, and helping both the enterprise and SaaS products see how they can take advantage of open source, and give back to the open source community, as I'm sure we'll get to later on in the conversation, because the enterprise needs to be self-sufficient, needs to own their own journey. And as this world is changing with things like GDPR and the Cyber Resiliency Act, more than ever, they need to plan for the future, and they need the stability in where their content management systems and their enterprise systems are.
So in their stack, they need to know that they own WordPress. The price of that is not going to go up. That if a new EU or perhaps California or new Australian or whatever regulation drops, that they have the ability internally to change direction and meet those legal requirements, that perhaps above all what the enterprise values now is ownership.
Yes,
freedom.
It's absolutely the most important thing, and it's a moving landscape. Before there was the drama in the U.S. politics, before there was drama in WordPress last year, already you had the GDPR, as you said, and you had the California Privacy Act. But then on top of that now, there's been this ever-evolving and changing Cyber Resiliency Act in Europe that's going through changes, and it's its final changes now. As you and I sit here and record this podcast, Crud Favorite is sending our director of technology to Vienna. He's on a plane right now to attend a conference that is being hosted by the OWA that includes Joomla and Drupal and Typo3. I believe we're representing WordPress as the FAIR project to talk about the CRA, because the Cyber Resiliency Act will start holding software responsible for its supply chain and make companies feel better and be assured that their supply chain is intact. That's becoming law September of next year. And there's a version of that even available that's going through the U.S. Congress.
So I had my head down the last couple of weeks and then popped on LinkedIn yesterday and scanned through, and a whole bunch of my friends are off to Vienna this week. And I didn't twig until just talking to you right now why they were all going to Vienna. So this is an important conference for a really important piece of legislation.
It is. It is.
What does that mean? What to have control over where your software comes from? Can you talk us through the implications of that?
Right. So,
what hoops are enterprises going to have to jump through?
So, predating even what happened last year with WordPress, the idea of supply chain security has always been important to the enterprise. The way large clients deal with that right now is, instead of using the standard WordPress updates, is they containerize everything. And they go through a process where you're not using automatic updates and you're not doing certain things. You're really protecting WordPress behind their own firewall. And they would have a very manual, tedious process to make sure that things are being updated that's more traditional. The WordPress automatic updates and plugin updates and all those wonderful things work great for the consumer ecosystem. But in the enterprise, you really have to be much more careful about how you're doing things in change management. So we've always had these practices. What's ending up happening, though, now is Europe has decided to codify that into legislation. There's also an American bill that's being explored We don't know where that is on the current timeline, but it can't be far behind the CRA. When the drama happened with the WordPress community around where are we getting our WordPress and who has control, and what ended up happening is, leaving all of that alone, the large corporations said, we need surety of supply chain. We need to know that there's a process that can be trusted and certified of how we get our software. That's what's behind all of this. And we need to know that it's not up to one organization or one individual that may have commercial or other motivations to make a change or not make a change. Now, so believe it or not, I'm not pointing my finger at Automatic and Matt. I'm saying any organization. This was a problem well before that.
Let me tell you a quick funny story that happened to us like 4 years ago, I want to say now. We had this little library in one of our plugins that we just updated it automatically. When there was a new version, we would get the library from GitHub, and then suddenly we started getting these reports that the Ukrainian national anthem was blasting away on people's websites. And it turned out this tiny little library from GitHub was run by a Ukrainian guy, and he had set a little bit of code in there that would play the Ukrainian anthem whenever someone on a Russian website would load up the script. And so we got a tough lesson on that our supply chain, I guess, was not being closely monitored enough. A fairly harmless outcome, but taught us a lesson.
Exactly. I mean, one of the reasons why a lot of WordPress firms don't get into the enterprise is, for our projects, we deliver software bill of materials. We're responsible to our customers to actually show them the provenance of where the software is coming from.
Can you talk me through that? What does it look like? What does a bill of materials look like for software?
So there are programs now that will go through WordPress and all your plugins and say, here's where all the scripts and all the sub-libraries are coming from. But it is really like a Russian matryoshka. It's really like a doll within a doll within a doll. It's very hard to figure that out. It's become practice now to run those scripts, but also to create a more simplified database or spreadsheet system of what is the top level, what are the first 3 levels of software, and be able to say to your customer, these are the plugins we used, and this is the provenance of this software.
So how does the FAIR project fit into this? Are you have a system where you're guaranteeing the provenance of all the plugins that are being provided? Or are you allowing the enterprises to take over the ownership of that?
Guaranteeing would be a strong word. The FAIR project is an attempt to create transparency and process behind the supply chain. So, for instance, WordPress out of the box is not GDPR compliant. For instance, WordPress,
because it calls home to WordPress.org
and a few other things. I'll leave that for the technical folks. Let's just say it's not compliant. And also, the only way to get plugins and plugin updates are through that one avenue of WordPress.org. So how do you create a system that is federated but trusted? So the idea behind FAIR was to create a system where you could not have one node. You could have multiple sources and a trust system between those sources to have a common marketplace and a common way to have distributions of WordPress, like you have distributions of Linux today. So
say you are ABC. ABC is a real company. I want to skip that one. So you're XYZ. So you're your XYZ large entertainment company, and you have hundreds of different websites. Using the FAIR system, you might be able to set up your own internal repository of plugins that can then deliver the plugins to all of your individual projects?
You could set up your own internal, for those of us in the WordPress world, sort of analogy to WordPress.org that has your own distribution of WordPress, that has a curated set of plugins that you have said are safe behind your firewall or within your install base that are pointing to you. And on top of that, you can, with where FAIR is going now and how we're working with the Blue Sky protocol, you can say, I also trust these other repositories. So if I'm big corporation A and I have my own repository, and I say big corporation B also has a repository I trust. I know they've done the right security vetting. I know they're enterprise grade. I know they're safe. I can make those plugins available also on my repository. So it's a system of trust and a system of validation with policies and rules that don't let any one entity control the supply chain.
So thinking this through, I mean, maybe I can use the WPP example that we've been talking about earlier in the episode. WPP is a large corporation with lots of sub-companies inside it. It could be that each of those sub-companies has its own version of FAIR, its own version of WordPress and plugins. They could talk to each other. They could maybe talk to a central WPP repository. That there's a lot of freedom in that to connect or disconnect depending on the requirements.
Absolutely. And even WPP with its competitors could decide to share for the good of it. For instance, we've openly said to the hosting companies that they should work together to create a safe environment for WordPress to have multiple ways of being managed and have really a more resilient plugin repository with supply chain management that can be guaranteed. And the FAIR project attempts to do that.
You're part of the Scale Consortium, which is a group of agencies. Are you doing that kind of collaboration internally? Do you have shared work, shared code, shared? Is it possible to use something like FAIR to?
Those are two separate things. So if you look at the Scale Consortium is another initiative where a group of very storied WordPress agencies that have a big interest in WordPress in the enterprise, felt like we could help communicate to the enterprise the value of WordPress. Because unlike other open source projects, there really wasn't a central marketing arm that was independent of a large host or of the project itself that really was focused on the enterprise. The great thing about WordPress is that you can use it for your own personal blog, for a small business, or to run the Walt Disney Company websites. So the idea was, how can we focus on that sector and help them understand the value? So it's really a marketing association of agencies who are trusted and known within the enterprise world for delivering high quality WordPress.
Okay, so perhaps the philosophy is similar in terms of competitors or perhaps quasi-competitors getting together to collaborate and build something. And you're taking that same approach with FAIR and perhaps trying to convince hosting companies who are often brutal competitors to work together to kind of ensure the integrity of the industry that they're in.
But that's the most beautiful part about open source, right?
you're not Adobe, for example, who is in a necessarily life and death competition with Sitefinity or whoever their major rivals are now. That the hosting companies are, the success of one does not automatically lead to the death of the others out there.
Exactly.
Are you having much luck so far in the adoption of FAIR with enterprise, with your clients?
We have several large organizations that are testing it and installing it. And we are now about 30 days out from our major 30 days ago was our major 1.0 release, where we really had brought most aspects together. And it's passed the tests of the CISOs, the chief security officers of a few different large organizations. And now they're testing it for scaling, which we're very proud of. We have the support of partners like Cloudflare. We have the support of the Linux Foundation, which, as you know, has 20 plus year history of really the best management of open source projects, open, transparent governance. We are working diligently to make it available to more and more. And I feel like 2026, you'll be hearing a lot more around how FAIR can be used by large organizations to really do the same thing that WordPress is supposed to do, be able to take hold of your own roadmap and your own decision-making and make your own customized experience within open source CMS.
So the Linux Foundation is kind of a neutral body, not helping to necessarily guide FAIR, but helping to provide the resources for it to run effectively.
Right. So I'm very proud that Crowd Favorite is a member of the Linux Foundation, and we're trying to help support open source projects. The way they do it is much more transparent and much more well-governed than most other systems of open source governance that I've seen out there. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with them over almost the last year in trying to pull together the FAIR project.
The Linux Foundation has been in this business a long time. I seem to remember, and I'm probably going to get some angry emails from people who remember this better than me. But 20 years or so ago, when Joomla was forking from Mambo, I seem to remember the Linux Foundation being a helpful resource. And even, I don't think it went particularly far, but there were even some discussion of putting the Joomla project under the Linux Foundation, because even back then, 20 years ago, they were offering a kind of a neutral ground for open source projects to have their legal backing, to have their dot the I's and cross the T's.
The amount of support they give is incredible. OpenJS and Kubernetes and some of the most powerful open source projects that power the internet are part of the Linux Foundation and governed by the Linux Foundation. They've really set it up well to be an impartial host and help the organization to really govern well. I'll give you a great example. The way it works within a Linux Foundation project, there is a technical steering committee that's made up of contributors, and those contributors democratically elect chairs or co-chairs. And they're responsible for the technical direction of the project. The project does have a board, does have a technical advisory committee, does have separate marketing functions, but they're held separately from the roadmap of the technical project. And there's checks and balances, like in any good governance, that really help a project like Kubernetes and a project like OpenJS work in amazing ways and advance both commercially and within open source. They've really found that balance.
Well, this is far from their first rodeo. They've helped other projects before, and maybe they've found a lot of flaws in the government model and improved it over time. And now FAIR is benefiting from, say, 20 plus years of experience in helping these projects run themselves.
Absolutely.
But the ultimate goal behind this is to help make WordPress a reliable, trusted platform that enterprises can adopt.
Yes.
This is a key part of making sure that a company like Disney or companies of that size are comfortable putting their systems on WordPress.
Look, it was architected from day one. FAIR was architected from day one to be a system that could plug right into and become part of WordPress.org. WordPress.org would become a node just like any other, and we could ensure for the entire world a open, sustainable path for maintaining the infrastructure behind WordPress. It's not competitive. It's supposed to be additive.
So good for WordPress, good for the WordPress customers in the enterprise, good for crowd favorite, and hopefully good for WordPress in general. Cool. So wrapping up now, what is on the roadmap for FAIR over the next few months? Are we expecting anything new to drop, or is the main thing on the horizon making sure that you're compatible and ready for the new regulations coming out of Europe?
From a business point of view, we're setting up the board, which is made up of companies, not people. And we're really, from my point of view, I think, and I think different people in the TSC might give you different answers, but from my point of view, the magic sauce to get right over the next 6 months or a year is creating a product ecosystem, a plugin and theme ecosystem that is an evolution of where we've been for the last 20 plus years, that really allows us to flourish and secure, yet open up the market even further. And that's some of the more controversial things that really need to be worked out. And we're hoping to work that out with the WordPress project and collaborating with the core contributors that have spent so much time working on both FAIR and the WordPress project and figuring out where they should go. One of the TSC co-chairs of the FAIR project is Mika Epstein, who ran almost single-handedly with a lot of volunteer help, the WordPress plugin repository for years, and is responsible for a lot of the policies that made plugins feel safe and addressed the security concerns of a lot of companies and people looking at WordPress for the first time.
It feels as if in the middle of 2025, we're at a pretty defining time, maybe for the next 20 years or so, that we have some major regulations dropping again. We have AI over our heads, and it may be that the decisions we make as a community over the next few months have an enormous impact. If we get these right, we could have a strong open source ecosystem for the next 20 years. We've had it for 20 years. The next few months may decide the next couple of decades or so.
That's what I feel strongly about. Next month in November of 2025, I'm actually giving a keynote speech at the Typo 3 conference in Dusseldorf in Germany, talking about the future of the open source decision-making process within the enterprise, because it affects all of us. It's not just about WordPress.
Typo 3, for people who may not be familiar, is a kind of almost not a rival, I guess, of, say, Drupal and WordPress, but heavily in the European market, right?
Right. Heavily in the European market, heavily in the developing markets. They do a lot of great work in helping developing nations organize their digital infrastructure. They're doing a lot of great work, and it's a great CMS. It's just a different type of architecture from WordPress with a different target market, but it's a great system. in the WordPress world, sometimes we forget that there's other open source CMSs and open source projects that are doing great work, and we need to continue to learn from them.
Yeah, we're part of a rich ecosystem.
We are.
So where can people follow the work you're doing with Crowd Favorite and with Fair as well? How can people keep in touch with you?
So at crowdfavorite.com, we talk about all things enterprise and open source. And on my personal blog at marucchi.com, my last name, I'm publishing every once in a while about what's going on with Fair from a business perspective. And at fair.pm is where the Fair project is housed. It's starting to come alive finally now. We're bringing on more and more folks who are helping with some content. And it'll take you to the GitHub repository. All the code's freely available, and we invite people to help come and contribute. We have a lot of core contributors from the WordPress project working on Fair, but we also would love to have some new contributors, folks who want to understand where WordPress could go in the future, continue to contribute to the WordPress project and to the Fair project.
Wait, fair.pm is for package manager, yes. Or? Okay.
Package manager, correct.
Wait, what country does that come from? What country is setting a PM domain?
You know that? You know what? I don't remember.
PM. But
apologize.
I'm going to Google this right after the podcast. Cool. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Karim. I wish you all the best with your WordPress work, your Fair work. I know they're tightly connected, and hopefully we continue to have a rich open source ecosystem for another few decades.
Steve, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.